Good morning, Christ Church, and welcome to a musical offering for the 6th Sunday of Easter. This is also the Sunday prior to Ascension Day, which we celebrate on this coming Thursday. Today is also known in the Episcopal Church as Rogation Sunday, in recognition of the tradition of observing the 3 days before Ascension Day as Rogation Days, during which processions occur and prayers are offered for the good earth and hospitable fields at the time of spring planting. This custom originated in France and made its way to England and on to the United States. The two hymns this morning reflect this tradition, but more about those later. In today's Gospel, St. John reminds us of these words of Jesus. "If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, because he abides with you, and he will be in you." And later in the passage, St. John writes that Jesus said, "I will not leave you orphaned. I am coming to you. In a little while, the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live." How I wish that we could be together so that all of us could hear the Christ Church choir sing the extraordinarily beautiful anthem in which the great 16th century English composer of church music, Thomas Tallis, sets key portions of this gospel text. Nevertheless, we who are experiencing this time of isolation and removal from much of what we cherish in our earthly life are heartened by these words of Jesus, because they offer us both strength and assurance in our earthly journey, a reminder that we all need at such a time as this. Today, our first hymn is hymn number 400, "All Creatures of Our God and King." Both of the hymns this morning express thanksgiving and wonder at all of God's creation. In this first hymn, St. Francis of Assisi, that great saint of the Middle Ages, invites all creatures to lift up our voices and sing God's praises. Later, St. Francis recalls rushing winds and soft breezes, swift flowing water, fire so intense and fiercely bright, dear Mother Earth, and flowers and fruits. Known as the Canticle of Brother, Son, and of All Creatures, St. Francis' text provides us with a rich panoply of God's wondrous creation and exhorts us all to celebrate and offer prayers of thanksgiving for God's many gifts to us through nature. Although these words of St. Francis are much loved and revered and have enjoyed wide ecumenical usage, it is a matter of some curiosity that this text did not appear in earlier hymnals of the Episcopal Church. In the hymnal 1982, the text is paired with an equally popular tune that, like so many others that we consider standard in our hymn repertory, is part of our inheritance from our sisters and brothers in Germany, this time from the Catholic musicians in Cologne during the early part of the 17th century. These faithful musicians had reworked a much earlier tune from the early 16th century in Strasbourg. Centuries later, it fell to that great hero of 20th century English church music, Ralph Vaughan Williams, to revise the earlier tune, supply his own imaginative genius, and provide sturdy harmonies that have gained much favor in more modern Christian musical practice. St. Francis' sprawling text does not lend itself well to abbreviation. So, please join me in singing the first 4 stanzas of hymn 400, "All Creatures of Our God and King." Johann Pachelbel was a German composer, organist, and teacher who lived and worked in southern Germany and in Austria. He spent time and worked in Nuremberg, Regensburg, Vienna, Erfurt, and Stuttgart. Certainly his fame in the United States is related to the immense popularity of the ubiquitous Pachelbel canon that has been requested as entrance music for millions of weddings and is, because of its boring bass line, much disliked and considered groan-worthy by cellists around the world. The fact is that Johann Pachelbel, during his lifetime, achieved great notoriety as an organist and a composer of both secular and sacred music. Of particular significance are his many settings of German hymns and chorales. In fact, his contributions to this genre of music properly earned him a place among the most important composers of the Middle Baroque period. The music of Pachelbel that I'm about to play is comprised of several sections of a series of variations of a well-known German hymn, Jesus, You Are My Life. This tune appears twice in our hymnal, the hymnal 1982, at number 295 and at number 356. The tune itself is not the creation of Pachelbel, but rather it is the work of an earlier German composer of church music, Melchior Vulpius. I shall play the harmonized hymn tune first, and then several of Pachelbel's variations, in which you will hear the chorale tunes subjected to various rhythmic alterations and just decoration here and there. Then I'll conclude by playing the hymn tune again. Jesus, You Are My Life by Johann Pachelbel. hymn for today's Rogation Sunday is hymn 405, All Things Bright and Beautiful. It would be interesting to consider how many people came to know this wonderful hymn, both text and music, because of its celebrated PBS television series, All Creatures Great and Small, based on the books of the British veterinary surgeon James Herriot. I suspect that this may be the case for many of us. Several weeks ago, I mentioned that we owe a great deal to the English poet Cecil Francis Alexander, who authored many hymns for children, several of which are included in our hymnal, including Once in Royal David City and this morning's Rogation hymn, All Things Bright and Beautiful. Indeed, this much-loved text, Mrs. Alexander provides us with an illustration of the second article of the Apostles' Creed, namely, God the Father, maker of heaven and earth. Indeed, Mrs. Alexander wrote an entire series of hymns for children based on the articles of the Creed. Included among these is the aforementioned Once in Royal David City, and There is a Green Hill Far Away. What is not widely known, however, is that Mrs. Alexander's original text for All Things Bright and Beautiful includes a verse that was wisely and thankfully deleted from all modern hymnals that include this otherwise wonderful expression of God's creation. The objectionable text, clearly a product of a particular time and the unfortunate cultural realities of 19th century England, one need only recall the dark satanic mills of William Blake's famous poem, to understand why these words might not be what one would want to embed in the minds of young children, no matter how accurate and how real they may have been. The offending verse reads, "The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them high or lowly and ordered their estate." These words were widely disparaged as infamous. One critic went so far as to observe, quote, "Here the Tory stratification of society is given the sanction of God Almighty. Belief in such a divine order would make social and economic change impossible and would confine all philanthropic work to medicating the symptoms rather than eradicating the causes of poverty, crime, and oppression," end quote. In my remarks this morning, I shall spare us all any possible references to the relevancy of this insightful observation to current times more than a century later. Certainly, no scholars believe for a minute that Mrs. Alexander, by writing these words, was supporting or condoning social and economic injustice, nor do any of these scholars believe that she was attempting to further a particular political agenda. Rather, Mrs. Alexander was probably assembling images that an uncritical child's eye might observe and attempt to understand as part of God's plan. Nevertheless, we can appreciate why this stanza has been omitted from all hymnals, now for more than a century. Royal Oak, the well-known tune with which this text is paired, was included by English composer Martin Shaw in a collection entitled Song Time in 1915. The tune name seems to refer to a famous tree in Shropshire in which King Charles II hid himself during his escape following the Battle of Worcester in 1651. This tune has been known in some English circles by other names, including the Jovial Crew, and its source is thought by some scholars to have been a loyalist song that celebrated the restoration of Charles II to the English throne in 1660. That said, Royal Oak has been long associated with these words of Mrs. Alexander. Again, this text does not lend itself well to abbreviation, so I invite you to sing all stanzas of hymn 405, All Things Bright and Beautiful. during Eastertide, we continue to conclude our musical offerings with the simple song which we sometimes sing at Christ Church at the conclusion of communion. This lovely communal musical blessing, Peace I Leave With You, comes to us from the monks of the Western Priory in Vermont and offers us the music and the words from a former Benedictine monk and retreat leader, Gregory Norrit. Let's sing Peace I Leave With You.